Great, well, it's great to be here, and I want to thank Graham for organizing and bringing together this great community of people who are really committed to deeply rethinking how and what we should be learning in today's society, an issue which certainly is very important to me. It's great also to have an opportunity to come here to London. It gave me the opportunity, I'm spending the week in Europe. I do work with the LEGO company, so I started off in Denmark earlier this week, and tomorrow I'm going off to a conference in Paris. And being in Europe for the week, it led me to start thinking about some of the great inventions that have come forth from Europe. And if you start thinking about great European inventions, many people might start by thinking about the 15th century when Gutenberg invented the printing press. And then maybe a few centuries later, in the 18th century, when James Watt invented the steam engine. These are world-transforming inventions. But as I think about great European inventions, it's not these that I think about. For me, the greatest of all inventions came in the 19th century. That was the invention of kindergarten. So as some of you might know, it was around in the 1830s that Friedrich Froebel invented the first kindergarten. And you might think, well, what's such a big invention about that? Just opening a school for younger kids? But there was a lot more to it than just saying, let's bring younger kids to school. Froebel saw from the beginning that a very different approach to education and learning was needed. At the time, most education was just about a teacher standing in front of the classroom, lecturing, and kids writing down word for word what was being said. And he knew that something very different was needed for 5-year-olds. So he started thinking about a new approach of where children would be actively engaged in designing and creating and experimenting and exploring. And to do this, he recognized that a new set of materials was needed. So he was both an educator and a designer. He started designing what became known as Froebel's gifts, a collection of materials that kids could use to build patterns and constructions. And he brought these into the kindergarten and supported kids of working on different design activities. And these Froebel gifts and the ideas of his ideas of kindergarten spread around the world, influencing innovators like Maria Montessori and many others. And we can see in today's kindergarten, you still see some of the echoes of the original Froebel ideas, where children in many kindergartens are actively engaged in designing and creating in collaboration with one another, whether it's building towers with blocks or pictures with finger paint, and working on things that they care about and are passionate about. And for me, those are some of the things that make kindergarten a very special place. As kids design and create in kindergarten, they learn many things. When they build a tower with blocks, they learn about stability, what makes things stand up or fall down. When they mix finger paints together, they learn how colors mix together. But maybe most important, they start to learn about the creative process. When I think about the process of learning in kindergarten, I sometimes capture it with this, what I call the creative learning spiral. And it starts with the imagination. So kids might come in and they have an idea of city of the future. And they pull out the blocks and they start creating it. It's not enough just to imagine. You have to start creating. And they start building a tower. And they play and experiment with it. For me, play is a type of experimentation of trying things out. They share it with others. They start working together, and someone will build a house and a road in front of the tower. Maybe the tower will fall down at some point, and they'll start reflecting, why did it fall down? How can I make a better tower? And that gives them new ideas, and they imagine a better building and start again, and it spirals and spirals. So I think this is the way all creative activity happens, and we're off to a good start in the traditional kindergarten. Unfortunately, this approach to learning often gets changed as kids move on to later grades in school. And too often, in many places, we change from this style of learning to this style of learning, of delivering information and seeing that the model of education is just being about transmitting or delivering information from a teacher to a learner. And unfortunately, this style of learning is starting to infiltrate down into the kindergartens in many places around the world. Increasingly now, you go to a kindergarten and you see kids filling out math worksheets and looking at phonics flashcards. So kindergarten is starting to become more like the rest of school. And what I want to argue is that we need to do exactly the reverse. We need to make the rest of school, in fact, the rest of life, more like kindergarten. And as we try to do that, I feel there is a role for new technologies and new media. The same way that Froebel's gifts help bring a new approach to kindergarten, we need new materials and new technologies to bring the kindergarten approach to learners of all ages. And not just any technology will do. Too often, when people bring new technologies into the classroom, as it was recognized by many of the speakers yesterday, they simply bring the new technology into the old existing model. They use the technology just to deliver information to the learner and try to make the technology a good instructor. And that's not at all what we need to spread the kindergarten approach and an approach to let people grow up as creative thinkers. We need to think how new technologies, like the wooden blocks and finger paints of kindergarten, can allow learners of all ages to design, create, experiment, and explore in new ways. And that's a big part of what we do in my research group at MIT. We try to think about how we can develop these new technologies and activities to extend the kindergarten approach. And we see examples out there. One reason I've been drawn to the LEGO company is I see the traditional LEGO brick as perhaps the ultimate Froebel gift of the 20th century, very much in the spirit of Froebel's gifts, but brought to the 20th century. But what are the Froebel gifts of the 21st century? And that's what we're trying to work on. So at least one direction we've taken is to extend the LEGO brick. So rather than just building structures, that you should be able to build mechanisms and behaviors, make things that come alive and sense and communicate. So we've worked on a variety of robotic construction kits, like LEGO Mindstorms, that allow kids to build not just towers, but different types of creatures that move and interact and communicate, and in the process, learn new ideas and become more creative thinkers. Let me show you a video of a group of kids using some of the prototypes of some of these robotic kits that we've worked on. This is a group of 10 to 13-year-old girls who were at a 2-week workshop. And the challenge they were given was, use these new materials to invent something that would be useful to you in your everyday life. And at the end of the 2 weeks, a television crew came and did a video about some of the projects that they had worked on. Volume?
Christina Costa is trying to build a better mousetrap, make that gerbil trap.
Every time they want to go inside this gerbil house, they press this light sensor.
It's one of the many inventions created at this free math and science camp run by the Computer Museum and the Girl Scouts, where girls from Boston are devising everything from an odometer for rollerblades to a diary security system.
When someone touches this to try to open the diary, it'll take a picture of that person.
So like if your creepy little brother tries to read your diary,
Yeah.
he's on camera.
Yes.
So I think you can see just from those few examples the incredible creativity that's possible when you give the right types of technology and the right types of support. Again, I don't want to underplay the fact there was a group of teachers around who were helping them and supporting them and as they worked on these projects. But I think for me, what made this so successful is that they were able to really build on their own interests. They were working on projects that they deeply cared about. The first girl in the video, she wasn't just building a house for any old gerbil. She was building a house for her gerbil. And she really cared about it. She wanted to make a house with a nice interactive door for her gerbil. And then she collected data from the house to be able to find out when the gerbil was going in and out. Now, don't report this to the local board of the cruelty to animal and privacy for animals, but she was collecting data, without consent from the gerbil, but wanted to know, when is it that what the gerbil did at night while she was sleeping. And she found out that there were these bursts of activity at different times of night. So it was a way for her to get a better understanding of what her gerbil was doing and what the gerbil was like. Or the second girl with the rollerblades. She loved rollerblading. And she was always curious, how fast am I going? And she knew when she rode in the car with her parents that the car went 30 miles per hour or 40 miles per hour, but how fast was she going on her rollerblades? So she was able to collect the number of the sensor gave rotations per second, but then she had to do the conversion. She spent a lot of time, things that she was probably taught in the classroom and never paid attention. But now she had a real reason for learning how to convert revolutions per second into miles per hour. And we saw the power of, when you care about what you're working on, being able to make deeper connections to the ideas. Or the last girl with the diary security system. Again, nothing more personal than your own diary, and she wanted to protect from her brother. So we see the opportunities, if we provide the right tools, technologies, and support, to allow children to continue to learn in the kindergarten style of experimenting, exploring, designing, creating. And in the process, learn more about how the world around them works. But of course, we know in today's society, children grow up not just building things, not just interacting in the physical world, but spending time interacting in the virtual world, the online world. So the same way that we want to give children an opportunity to design things in the physical world, like these girls were doing, we also need to provide opportunities to let them design things in the virtual world, in the online world. So for that purpose is why we started developing the software project that we call Scratch. So Scratch is in a similar spirit to building with Lego, but instead of building structures and mechanisms in the world, you build different types of interactions and animations and simulations on the computer screen. So children can use Scratch to program interactive stories and games and then share them in an online community, much like uploading videos to YouTube, but here you're uploading interactive projects that you yourself programmed. And children have used this. Since we launched this several years ago, there have been more than 2 million projects shared on the Scratch website. And we've been amazed not just by the number, but the incredible diversity of projects. Every day there are thousands of new projects shared by young people around the world. And again, you can see the creativity in the diversity of projects that they work on. Everything from animated stories, to interactive birthday cards, to anime soap operas, to virtual construction kits, to simulations, to political commentaries, to recreations of classic video games, to interactive artwork, to science projects for school. So we see how children, given the right tools, again, can learn to express themselves in new ways. And I think the same way that Conrad Wolfram yesterday talked about seeing programming as a type of composition, a way of expressing yourself. Too often, people think of it more in terms of learning a grammar, or they see it more like penmanship as opposed to composition. But for us, programming is a way to express your ideas to the world. And it's important for people to be able to, whether they want to make an animated story or a political commentary or a simulation, to have a way where they can express their ideas and design and create to be able to share with others. Let me share a story about some of the ways that some young people have used this. The first story I'll tell is from a couple years ago, and I know it happened in May because the story starts the day before Mother's Day. And in the United States, there's Mother's Day in May. Actually, is there Mother's Day here in May? In March. Okay, well, it's May in the United States. And it was the day before Mother's Day, and I realized I had not gotten my mother anything for Mother's Day. So I thought, well, maybe, since I work with Scratch, I'll make my mom an interactive Mother's Day card in Scratch. But before doing that, I thought, well, let me search the website to see if other people have been doing that. So I typed Mother's Day into the Scratch search box, and I get a long list of Mother's Day cards that others had been creating, many of them created in the previous 24 hours by procrastinators much like myself. So I started looking at what they had created, and I saw a 9-year-old who had made a Mother's Day animation, not with the best spelling, but with the best intentions. And it's always considerate to give your mom a chance to replay, as you know she'll want to. Or Or another project, this I think by a 13-year-old, who sort of tells the story of thinking about making the Mother's Day card and realizing that it was Mother's Day and Googling it to find out the date of Mother's Day and then creating an animation to say how much he loves his mom. Or one final example of an interactive Mother's Day card that when you move your mouse, it transforms each of the letters of Happy Mom Day into saying how much he loves and cares about his mom. So when I saw these, I was really happy because I thought it captured what we were trying to accomplish with Scratch. Because we really, really wanted to have it as a way for people to be able to express things they cared about, to be able to share their ideas with people that they loved and cared about. That oftentimes programming might be seen as a path to a certain job or profession, and it's great if some people start with Scratch and end up becoming professional programmers, but that's not our core goal. Again, we need programmers in the world. Some of my best friends are programmers, but I think our main goal is that everyone needs to express themselves. The same way that when you learn to write, a few people will grow up and become professional writers, journalists or novelists, but most people won't. But it's still important to write, to be able to write a card to a friend or just to write your shopping list. The same with programming. Some will do it professionally, but for many, it's a way of expressing your ideas to others or to just express yourself artistically. And that's really what we were hoping for with Scratch. And I saw that it came about in looking at these cards. Actually, to finish the story, I never ended up making my own Mother's Day card for my mom. I sent her links to all of these cards. And she reacted exactly as I hoped she would. She said, "I'm so proud to have a son who created the software that allowed all of these children to make Mother's Day cards for their moms." So one more story from Scratch. And this is a story that happened at a conference. Maybe it was in a room roughly this size with a group of people. And it was a conference about the future of storytelling. And I was on the program to talk about storytelling and to give some examples from the work we were doing with Scratch. But the speaker right before me was talking about a project that they were doing in its early stages. There was one of these so-called transmedia projects that they were taking some ideas from a children's book and turning it into an online world. The books that they were using, probably some of you are familiar with the Warrior Cats books. Actually, how many people know the Warrior Cats books? Actually, not so many. So these are incredibly popular books for elementary school age. They've sold millions of copies. It's about these clans of cats and the ways they interact in the world. I believe it's the best-selling series of children's books after Harry Potter. So a lot of young people care about this. So this company, the person was speaking before me at the conference, their company was taking ideas from the Warrior Cats book and making an online world, a multiplayer world, where you could go on and you had a cat as your avatar and you interacted with other cats. And as he was talking about the work he was doing, he said the following to describe the project that they were working on. He said, "There'll be hundreds of other cats in the forest with you. What will happen is that you will consume these narrative missions, and each mission is presented as an essential piece of the clan's mythology that you need to grasp." And as I listened to that, one thing jumped out at me. The fact that he said, "You'll consume these narrative missions." And even though this was online and interactive, the model really was you were there consuming narratives, that someone was presenting a narrative to you, and you got to move around and consume the narrative mission. So as I was listening to him, I opened up my laptop, again went to the search box in Scratch, and typed in Warrior Cats. And there, I found literally hundreds of projects where kids had been creating their own Warrior Cat narratives. So it's a very different approach for thinking about children's engagement with media, where they're consuming narratives or influenced by the narratives in the world around them using it to remix and repurpose and add their own stories. So I started looking at these different projects and quickly changing my PowerPoint presentation and starting to find different projects. I looked at, here's one project where you get to build your own warrior cat, and you click different things to create the cat and choose its fur and its eye colors and its spots, and then put it in different environments. So it's a warrior cat creation kit. I looked at another project. There was a world where you get to control one of the warrior cats, and you explore the world, and you can click on different objects in the world to find out more about them, to find out about the plants. You can also hit certain keys to be transported to other parts of the world, and different keys to do battle with other cats. Now, this project, it was done by a young child, I think it was a 12-year-old, whose Scratch username was Flame Spirit, and this was the project page that it was on. So in addition to sharing the project, Flame Spirit writes project notes explaining how you can use this project. You can see here several hundred people have viewed this project. 2 people have remixed the project, meaning that they took the project, made their own changes to it, and did their own version of it. And that's an active part of the Scratch community where people are inspired by each other's work and remix it, share with one another, and then put up their remixed version. In fact, about 1/3 of the 2 million projects on the site are remixes of other projects, where young people are learning how to draw on ideas from others. And it leads to lots of rich discussions, because many times someone will put a project there, someone will remix it, and the author will say, they stole my project. We'll then start talking about, no, here in the Scratch community, we encourage people to share and build on each other's work. And of course, you should give credit when you build on someone else's work, and that's part of being a member of the community. And we've also added some automatic attributions that will say that this project was based on that project. But we're trying to build a community that respects each other's work, but builds on each other's work, like the scientific community and many other communities. So we try to build not just a way of creating projects, but what it's like to be part of a creative community. So as I look here, underneath the project, there's a comment section. And you can see how, Flame Spirit started to get comments from others. Like someone just said, awesome. And Flame Spirit said, I just posted version 3. It has an extra level. So they're promoting the new version that they did. Someone else writes, oh my God, awesome. Hey, can you help me? I'm making a new age interactive Warrior Cats game, a bit like yours, with different styles. So it's asking for advice. And Flame Spirit says, to talk to others, I just programmed the cast to do this and that. So explains how she did it and gives advice to others. So again, it's learning to be part of a community where people ask questions and give feedback to each other and give advice to one another. You even see lots of the young people build tutorials explaining how to do things that they've learned. We'd expected that we would make tutorials for the Scratch website. We never imagined that so many of the young people would make tutorials for the Scratch website. So I think as we see what's happening on the Scratch website, in this example, you see some of the core elements of what we're aiming for. One part is helping young people learn to think creatively, not just to consume narratives, but create your own narratives. And by creating, you move down the path of learning to think creatively and moving through that creative learning spiral. At the same time, young people are learning to reason systematically. This is the visual language that's used to create the Scratch programs. So you snap different commands together, much like Lego bricks, to build up the programs. And you need to think systematically to make the different characters do what you want to do. So it's both creative thinking, but also systematic reasoning to put your project together. And lastly, you're learning to work collaboratively, how to share projects, be inspired by others, to get suggestions from others, what it's like to be a good member of the community, to be able to respect others in the community, to be able to share your ideas with other members of the community. Scratch has been used in the beginning, especially at home. Kids use it at home and in after-school centers. But in the last couple of years, it's really moved into schools, and many educators are bringing Scratch into schools. And we were happy to hear, recently when the education secretary here was recommending Scratch for use in schools. We have a whole separate website, that's called Scratch Ed, Scratch for Educators, where educators share their stories and lesson plans. Because although we have some ideas of how to use Scratch in the classroom, we want to bring together the ideas of educators around the world. So the Scratch Ed website, this online community where there are now thousands of educators who are sharing their, again, experiences in the classroom, their curriculum ideas, their assessment plans, their lesson plans with Scratch. And we hope to continue to build this community, because I think the way it's going to succeed is the same way that the young people learn from one another. People in the educator community will learn from one another as they participate in these communities. But I think for this to really work in the classroom, and also outside of the classroom, what's most important is we need to shift mindsets in the ways people think about learning and the way they think about technology. Again, I think these are some of the themes of this conference overall of Learning Without Frontiers, of how we can shift the way people think about learning and the way they think about technology. Because right now, when people think about ICT or information and communication technology, for me, ICT really won't have a big impact in the classroom or in children's lives until we rethink what it really means. So for me, ICT needs to be thought of as invention and creativity technologies. That we need to think about technologies not as a way just to deliver information or just to communicate, although those can be useful. But the real transformation in learning and education will happen only when we give young people the opportunity to design and create and experiment and explore, like the way it happens in kindergarten, but now we need to bring those ideas to learners of all ages. Thank you very much.